Well, I'm glad you're with us. AFR Talk, AFA Today, every single day. It's your normally your look at the news of the day. You're in the middle of the day. But today, the news is, it's still going on. You know, there's still tension in Russia and Crimea, which I thought was the poison that they injected into Tom Cruise in that one Mission Impossible story. Little did I know it was an actual country. But the idea today that we take some time and we slow down and we kind of tell the rest of the world we're gonna shut that down for a second, and we're gonna think about what it is to participate in Lent and having a Lenten devotional. Ray Pritchard is my guest, and we're talking about his book called "The Lord of Glory: The Names of Christ." It's a Lenten devotional around the names of Christ. Ray, the practice of Lent. Generally, it's been kind of the scuttlebutt of the office today, people talking about what they're giving up, what they're not giving up. One of my very dear friends, Noelia, back in the office, came back and she goes, "We were at the table last night, and my 8-year-old daughter says, 'I think I know what I'm going to give up for Lent.'" And so Noelia looks at her, and she's only 8 years old, so she's thinking, well, this could be a very powerful teaching moment. "Okay, sweetie, what are you going to give up for Lent?" "Mommy, I'm going to give up hot sauce." And, everyone at the table tried to refrain from bursting laughing. So I then asked her, I said, "Well, is that a big deal?" She goes, "Oh, Kev, it's huge. She eats it on everything."
Wow.
So I said, well, okay, then I guess it counts. But the idea of people giving things up for Lent, is it a biblical idea? Is that just a Catholic thing? What's with taking the sacrifice and participating in that?
It's certainly not just a Catholic idea, though I think they've developed the concept maybe more than anyone else. It's the idea, the 40 days has the idea of Jesus in the wilderness, when at the end of those 40 days of fasting and prayer, he was tempted by the devil. So the sense is that it goes back to the concept that I mentioned earlier, that we are too much of this world. Mm-hmm. And I don't even mean
even with hot sauce.
Yeah, even with hot sauce, right? That we're into this world, and this world is into us. And one thing that happens when you, quote, give something up for Lent, and sometimes, it's things you need to give up, it's bad habits, it's destructive patterns, but sometimes it's something that, I know of no verse that speaks against hot sauce, right? I was, Twitter had a list of the tweets of people, what they were giving up, and the number one thing was chocolate. Well, I do not believe it is a sin to eat chocolate.
That was the ladies' list you read.
Well, chocolate would be up on my list somewhere,
Okay.
And I do not think to eat chocolate is a sin, but the idea is that you voluntarily forego some things, in the same sense that Jesus went into the wilderness to remind yourself of how weak you are in your own flesh. One of the points of you give stuff up is that very often that lasts, about a week, lasts about 10 days. Then you really feel, oh man, I've really messed this up. Part of that is to show you that in yourself, you really don't have the power to change, that we need the Lord. And Lent is anything that will show us our weakness and point us to Jesus Christ and cause us to depend upon him more than ever. That's a good thing for the soul. So we give up some things, maybe remove some of the extraneous clutter from life so that we have the time we really need to draw closer to Jesus. And I think, I don't think it really matters what you give up, because if you gave up everything, but you didn't draw closer to Christ, you really would have missed the point of this whole season. So don't just give up, but also add on new love and new devotion for the Lord.
And the senior pastor at our church here locally on Sunday said, maybe giving something up, if you're already living a circumspect life, maybe there's not a lot to give up. So Lent can also be observed by going and being proactive in reaching out in a way that may be a little less than ideal, for your comfort zone. And that was a good challenge for the people that needed it. Well, before we went to the last break, I mentioned fragrant offering, and I wanted you to talk to us about that. I want to give you plenty of time to embrace that, because that is not a manly You say
Right.
fragrant offering, you don't think of a manly, powerful God. What's that name supposed to represent in the
First of
life
all-
and image of who Jesus Christ is?
First of all, the scripture reference is Ephesians 5:2. Christ loved us and gave himself up for us. That's a reference to the cross, as a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. Now, you'll think long and hard about Jesus' death on the cross. Maybe you watch, Mel Gibson, Passion of the Christ, and you'll go, "Wow, I don't see any fragrant offering there." And that's part of the paradox of this name, because in the first century, there was no worse way to die. That was the crucifixion was bloody, it was horrendous, it was terrible torture. It was designed to be a public spectacle by the Romans as a warning. I mean, Romans were good at killing people. They had a lot of ways to kill people, and they reserved crucifixion for whoever they considered to be the worst of the worst. And if you had been there, Kevin, if you and I had been standing at the foot of the cross and seen Jesus and those two thieves on either side hanging up there, suspended between heaven and earth, with the nails through the hands and through the feet, and the screams and the agony and the blood and the flies and the horrific nature of what crucifixion was, the incredible suffering, just physically, that people went through dying on the cross, you would say, "I don't see anything fragrant or beautiful about this." Well, this term, fragrant offering, comes from the Old Testament. They killed a lot of animals as part of the religion of the Old Testament. Jewish religion, to kill a lamb, kill a goat, kill a bull, and they would take the animal and they would cut it up, and then certain parts of it reserved for the priest and other parts were put on the altar, and they would be burned on the altar as a sacrifice and offering to God. But one thing the priest would do is they would take a pinch of incense, and as the animal sacrifice was being burned, they would throw the incense onto the sacrifice, and what would rise up would be this cloud of smoke and burning incense, and it was called a fragrant offering to God. Now you apply that to the cross, and we just want to say it this way, that if you and I had been standing there, we would have been repelled by the horror of crucifixion. That day at Calvary, the smell of death was everywhere. But from the Father's point of view, the death of Christ was a fragrant offering. It was the sacrifice by which our Lord took upon himself the sins of the whole world. And this is a shocking way to put it. The cross smelled good to God. He was well pleased by the sacrifice of his Son. Man's murder became God's sacrifice, a heinous crime, paid an impossible debt. And that which seemed to be the most terrible miscarriage of justice in history, the murder of an innocent man, became the means of salvation for the very people who were putting him to death. Thus, the death of Christ, from man's point of view, a terrible crime, but from God's point of view, a fragrant offering, because it provided salvation to anyone who believes in him.
Ray Pritchard, very articulate, very meaningful, has gone through and identified 47 names of Christ. We are talking about only a couple of them here today, but the copy of his Lenten devotional, and you can read it on any e-device. You can read it on your laptop, your desktop, your tablet, your phone, anything that you've got that can handle a downloadable book. You can read this on. And I would encourage you to take it and to get it today. It will be available at keepbelieving.com all through Lent, but it's free today at amazon.com. Ray's not charging you anything for it at keepbelieving.com either. The idea is that you just take this material and begin to use it in your personal worship through the season, which, as everybody knows, begins today, Ash Wednesday. Ray, here's one that I've probably sung it in songs and it's zipped past my mind a lot. But I don't know that I understand the context of it. Jesus Christ is called the desire of all nations. Where does that come from? And remind us the context and why it's important.
Well, the phrase "desire of all nations" comes from the Old Testament book of Haggai, which won't necessarily help us a whole lot, because that's
now I know why I don't remember exactly stumbling on it from time to time.
That's in the white pages of the Old Testament, in the part of the Old Testament that we call the minor prophets. Okay,
Right.
and this has to do with that period of time after the Babylonian captivity, and the Jews have come back and they're trying to rebuild the temple. It's about 518, 517, 516 BC. It's along in there. And Haggai the prophet arises, and he has some words of encouragement for a man by the name of Zerubbabel. That's the background of the book of Haggai. Don't worry, God is going to give you the strength, and you're going to be able to rebuild this temple. And along the way there, in Haggai chapter 2, we're told that the desire of all nations shall come. And traditionally, that's been understood as a prophecy of Jesus Christ, not just in the rebuilding of the temple, but it's a prophecy of the time when Jesus will come again, and all nations will look to him. That what the temple, we understand the temple that Zerubbabel rebuilt, Solomon's temple, and the one that Herod had greatly expanded, the temple itself pictured in its design, in its priesthood, the temple itself pointed to Jesus. Well, in calling Jesus the desire of all nations, it's saying that what the temple pictured, Christ fulfilled. And that passage, that little sort of obscure passage in Haggai 2:6, is actually quoted in Hebrews chapter 12. Once more I will shake not only the earth but the heavens. That's a reference back to Haggai. The words "once more," I'm quoting from Hebrews now, show the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that only what cannot be shaken may remain. Kevin, that's what God is doing today. He's shaking the nations literally so that the world will be ready for the coming of Christ. And to call Jesus the desire of all nations simply means he is the only one who can fulfill the deepest desires of the human heart. There's just as a side note, we all know the great Christmas carol, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," I believe by Charles Wesley. There's a verse in there we hardly ever sing, but it's based on this: "Come, desire of nations, come." A statement that Jesus and only Jesus can fulfill the deepest needs and the deepest wants and the secret places of the human heart. We can look to the things of this world. They'll never ultimately satisfy. Jesus is the true desire of all nations.
Friends, I hope you're appreciating and enjoying Ray taking the time to be with us today because, when you're as busy as he is, in and out of airports all over the place, going to speak at conferences and back, the fact that he even finds time to write a book, I find impressive. But the fact that, Ray, you've taken time to be with us today. I want to ask, and I have to ask this, of the 47 names that you included, what was the one name that as you studied it, as you looked at it, maybe as you saw it anew or saw it for the first time, what was the one name that got into the heart, through the bone and marrow and all the way into the heart of Ray Pritchard in a way that was most meaningful? What name jumped out at you as you were preparing this project?
As I was working on it, and I came to Jesus, our great high priest, which is one that a lot of people have heard of, and very special, very important. Kevin, we all need a friend in high places. When you get in trouble, you need a friend up above. You something has happened in the family, something's happened on the job, you run out of money, you get a bad diagnosis from the doctor. You live long enough, you're gonna come to some place in life where there's nobody on earth who can help you, and you need a friend in high places. Well, Hebrews chapter 4 calls Jesus our great high priest who has passed through the heavens. That's very important. It means He's at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. We got the right man at the right place at the right time who is there to help us. There is no need so desperate. There is no night so dark. There is no problem so hopeless that Jesus cannot help you. That's why Hebrews 4 says, let us come to him to find grace to help in the time of need. And one translation says, grace to help in the nick of time. I love it, Kevin. He's the great high priest who can help us when we need it most.
All right. KeepBelieving.com is where you go and get a copy. It's a complimentary copy of Keep Believing Ministries. The ministry is headed by Dr. Ray Pritchard, our guest. And spend some time on his website. What a great resource. Podcasts of his sermons and his speaking engagements across the country. A great archive of searchable material on just about everything he's preached over the years. But today, right there on the homepage, there's a big link where you can click and you can get through and you can get a free copy of his Lenten devotional, Lent officially beginning today with Ash Wednesday. Kevin McCullough is my name. Ray, thanks for being with us again.
Thank you, Kevin.
I always appreciate it. This is AFA Today on AFR Talk. No rest for the weary. We'll be back tomorrow to take a look at everything that's going on in the news and tell you why it's important. But today I just wanted to take some time out and have this conversation. I hope it was beneficial. All right, coming up next, Brian Fisher, Focal Point. He'll keep your mind straight through the afternoon. You keep it right here on AFR Talk. I'm Kevin McCullough. This is AFA Today. We'll see you tomorrow.